This is The Process Shot. I'm Michael. I'm floating in space, and I've seen Lightyear, a new animated science fiction adventure movie from director Angus MacLane. Based on the character from the Toy Story films, this movie purports itself to be an origin story of sorts for Buzz Lightyear. Starting with an exploration and research ship crash landing on an unknown planet, stranding him and dozens of other crew members, with the only hope of escape being the development of hyperspace travel. Buzz volunteers as a test pilot, only to undergo the effects of time dilation, where minutes for him during these tests see years passing back on the planet. Decades later, and with the help of an android cat, and after a mutiny against a commander who has shut down the tests, Buzz finally achieves hyperspeed travel, only to return another several decades later, and now facing a new threat: mysterious robot invaders seeking to destroy the colony. Naturally, Buzz and a ragtag team of inexperienced fighters are the only hope left to save everybody on the planet. For whatever reason, I feel like Pixar has been making movies where the first act of the plot is the entire first half of the story. This one is a bit different for me because it actually feels like the movie is missing its first act, at least when taking a certain perspective. You see, the film opens up with a statement that the movie is from the Toy Story universe, and ideally it would introduce the character of Buzz to the world. However, this story lacks a proper introduction to him, whether it be his training or even a quickie origin story leading into the initial crash landing, or anything else which might be a bit more traditional. Instead, it drops us right into the middle of the story, introducing new characters and concepts without warning. Granted, they are at least given a chance to be introduced and developed over time in the usual ways, but it's still a bit hard to get past that this is how they are opening a movie that is ideally meant to spearhead a franchise. I figure that the inherent flaw here is that the movie was made more for the actual viewer, who has probably seen at least the first two Toy Story movies, as evidenced by the more than a handful of visual nods and direct references and callbacks to Buzz's lines and actions from those movies. It feels like every few minutes there's a point in this film where your brain lights up when one of those references happens, and you take pride in recognizing it, and for a moment you forget that this is supposed to be a standalone film of sorts that shouldn't be dependent on your own familiarity with the character. It kinda just makes the story feel a bit lazy overall, not only in how it falls back on the usual tropes and formulas for sci-fi and adventure, and at a few points tells the audience about things that could have been shown to them, but also in how it basically makes the viewer put in more effort to fill in the blanks than should be necessary. Plotting aside, the overall movie does at least have a lot going for it in its visuals and technical design. The planet's environments are extremely creative at times, with a great amount of variety in the various locations and a good sense of scale around the colony buildings, which we don't see much of, but still feels like something populated by people and has been lived in for years. Several indoor locations, and especially the spaceship designs, are also pretty well handled, and show a clear sense of identity or purpose, not to mention that they do truly have the impossibility that science fiction offers. The score for the movie is equally appropriate for the genre, with some rather soaring tracks that do bring out the emotion or tension of a scene. The film's overall cinematography is pretty impressive, especially during scenes in space that allow time to show off some more creative depictions of hyperspeed travel, as well as some rather beautiful interstellar giants. The editing is a bit more practical, but it's still able to keep everything flowing together well, with one highlight being a montage as Buzz goes on several test flights in a row and time passes by without him. The movie does look great overall, and I'd say that's always been one of Pixar's strengths. Unfortunately, it also feels like a strength that's been in service to weaker and weaker stories, or at least stories that could do well with a bit more depth beyond the basic structures of established formulas. Lightyear, Angus MacLane, 2022. 2.5 stars. I don't know if I'd recommend it, honestly. It's not great, but it's not awful. I suppose I'll just say that there are better movies to watch, but I won't stop you from seeing this if you're in the mood. That's it for this review. If you liked it, leave a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Oh, another thing, this movie has too many good visuals for something which is supposed to be from 1995. I mean, we all know what the original Toy Story looked like. Maybe it would be funny if they put out a VHS tape of this movie with those graphics.